Good morning, Exorcists. It's time for your daily archive reminder. Hound, Manhunter. Type 1 Cat 1, manifested in adolescent subject H19. Recruited to see record R9833. After suffering repeated schoolyard harassment. Repeated reports of haunted, closed factory building after dark drew interest from local teenagers and triggered standard seer protocols. Executed after lengthy hunt. Castle Team 23 KIA, but no Exorcist casualties. Now here's hoping the kid who made it's good at hunting themselves. Happy hunting. As above, so below. Oh, the poor kid. But here we are with our next CAIN Sin archive, Hound Manhunter. Also, a brief note, what are these archive chats for? These are just generally going over the examples that we have within the book of the different archived sins and seeing what rules we could apply to them in a hypothetical hunt based on them. Also act as a nice excuse to remind admins and players, the Exorcists, what possibilities there can be within a hound, or other types of sins in the other videos. Anywho, after that note, back to it. But Manhunter here is a fantastic example that a hound does not need to be anything actually that drastic. It usually forms from things that are drastic, some of the times, or a lot of the times, the death of the host. But in the case of Manhunter, it's just a kid who's bullied, harassed on the schoolyard. Now we don't know the exact severity of these harassments, but it's not being killed, compared to some of the other examples. But as to the traumas that potentially formed it, obviously, who wronged you, the bullies? How were you wronged? Bullying/schoolyard harassment, we don't know the particulars outside of those. And then what are you unwilling to sacrifice? I think either being hurt, the host themselves, or actually willing to then hurt someone. Like not willing to throw the punch, either through fear of being hurt yourself, or from inflicting pain on another. And then that desire just manifested into this type 1 Cat 1 Hound. But once again, something very particular of the host that we don't quite get. At least not in this report, because this host is now an exorcist, or is at least being recruited to be one. Poor H119. On to the way it manifested. Hound type 1 Cat 1. The most minor of all the sins, I guess. Still very threatening. It's got a kill count by the end of this. But compared to something like Doulahan, Cat 1 is not that big a deal. I say that. It's still very lethal. But there's no exorcist killed on the hunt, it's just some castle team and the obvious victims beforehand. And as to its form, we don't see much of it. It's even more stalking in the hallway and behind the scenes than Scather's picture was, with its appearances and brief mortals occasionally seeing glimpses of it being described as a haunting. And the fact mortals saw glimpses of it also brings up possible domains, that fear the mortal felt. But some just classic mishmash parts together to make it something monstrous. This one-eyed creature, can't quite see its face, fingers crawling up and going just over the ledge that's standing atop, and then one mantis-like limb jutting out of its back, or its shoulders. As far as we know, that's all we can see of it, given its stealthy and haunting nature. As for its possible domains, this is where I think the super stealthy thing was compared to the Scather. Not that they're directly exclusive from each other. One, I'm trying to mix them up to have a little more interesting of an archive read or potential hunt. And two, I feel like each of these sins is given to try and show off a different form of it. So more variety outside of having two identical, sneaky, stealthy ones. But first, a shuddering thing through a dark hall, literally feeding on and growing from that fear, and being able to reveal itself to mundane humans as this terrifying monstrosity. This terrifying presence stalking this factory. I think this works for Manhunter twofold. One, matching the haunting description and the haunting the factory appearing out of nowhere, the mortals and the castle team members that got caught up in this mess. And the other one is tied into the trauma. It's the bully. It's being the scary, intimidating thing. That fantasy of bullying the bully. The next is the catching of the doe, one for being a bit more intelligent, loosely, stalking its prey, a monster in the hallways. I mean, even with the one image we get of it and its description of stalking this factory floor and taking out a bunch of castle members, a stealthy ambushing hunter fits a ton. I'm then also chalking up the fact no exorcist is dead due to the fact it's type 1 Cat 1, because I was using the one exorcist death in Scather as an example of the one ambushed exorcist with the catching of the doe. Also again plays into the traumas a tiny bit of the individually picking, grouping up on, targeting someone out of the crowd to bully. Now the last one could be thrown around a ton, because while it is a very lethal sin, it doesn't necessarily describe how it's lethal. Obviously the giant mantis claws, but there's no firearms, so not annihilation of the wicked, that we know of. But it doesn't seem to have the same massive list that Scather and Doulahan had, nor the mythical implications of Doulahan, but I am still gonna go with the measured weight of death. Actually, scratch that, going against my notes here, going with turning blades, I laughed at their brittleness. Once again, being that unstoppable bully, that fantasy of being able to beat up your bullies. Striking the fear in them with a shuddering thing through a dark hall, the ambushing them, frightening them with the catching of the doe, and individual targeting, and then being this unstoppable force they can't do anything about with turning blades, I laughed at their brittleness. That just general tougher sin to fight, and would play into the exoskeleton, that mantis-like limb, if you're leaning way more into a bug angle, with what little bit we see of it. Afflictions. So for this one, I'm thinking Blood Scent. Namely to do with the revenge of the kid, or the possible revenge of being harassed or potentially injured themselves during these harassments. And perhaps the kid themselves getting injured during these harassments and wanting some kind of revenge, that taste of blood that then formed into the Hound. While the kid might not have taken it to that literal end, just informed to do it. For the palace, I think this is Freddy Krueger. Good old Nightmare on Elm Street, that burning furnace room, the basements, the hallways, the pipes. Again, that abandoned factory location, the teens going missing. Not that this is necessarily a reference for it, but I just think it's a very fitting location for where its palace is, or what the palace might look like. Again, the burning flames, the heat of the Hound, that stalking in the halls, this confusing place that you can't ever escape. No, just very simple. I think it's Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger hallways. One thing from that movie that always makes me laugh, and that's the Freddy car. But what do you think for Manhunter? What are the specifics for the domains, or what type of palace might it form? All the other details. And what do you think it looks like in totality, or what would you make it look like once it revealed itself from the shadows, and the possible one eye it has? Anywho, as our favorite Temerity Archivist says, happy hunting. As above, so below.